We don't want to go to war today, but the Lord of the Lashes has winning.
You know, I don't think Gold Roger ever actually referred to his treasure as being One Piece. Anyway, let's talk about politics. Not so fast. I didn't mean literal politics. I'm not here to tell you who I think Zoro would have voted for in the last election. He probably would have gotten lost on the way to the polling place. The curtains are blue discourse has ruined media literacy to the point that entire audiences refuse to believe that even the most blatantly obvious subtext exists. But everything is politics, and by virtue of existing and being created by a human being, all media is informed, consciously or not, by the creator's socio-political worldview. Even if you're one of those death of the author types who tries to separate art from artist, if only to make yourself feel less guilty, your own beliefs influence your interpretation of the narrative. In a more literal sense, of course One Piece is political. The only people who say otherwise are those for whom political has the same connotation as woke. If this applies to you, know that I am neither equipped nor sympathetic enough to pull your head out of your own ass for you. Go the fuck outside. As for the rest of you, you might be thinking that a shonen series like One Piece doesn't have much to offer but big punch-ups and big other things. But I think you'll find that shonen anime is no stranger to presenting its audience with deeper socio-political commentary. Speak softly but carry a big stick. Uber-conformist societies create an underclass that will lash out unless properly cared for. Look, just because it has a message doesn't mean it's a good one. One Piece is by no means an exception. I mean, the main antagonist of the series is the literal government. Short of naming the villains after politicians you don't like, it doesn't get much more political than that. The story centers around a group of career criminals fighting a military backed by a global shadow government that relies on violence and the control of information to maintain power. Members of said military grapple with their own place in this unjust regime, debating whether maintaining order and protecting the world from greater evils is worth participating in a corrupt system. There's racism, classism, and even Oda's own gradual coming to terms with the LGBTQIA existing as something other than a punchline. Very gradual. Despite being targeted at adolescent boys, One Piece isn't afraid to explore deeper themes. So what then is the main takeaway of the story? What is the message of One Piece? You're gonna laugh when you hear this. There isn't one.
You take forever to say nothing.
Let's take a look at this graph. Over here, we have the people who think that One Piece is just a dumb cartoon about pirates. Up here, we have the majority who believe that One Piece is about oppressive systems and how they must be dismantled by force. Then all the way over here, you have the people who looked a bit further and realized that One Piece really is just a dumb cartoon about pirates. All that set up until now was to make sure that as many of you as possible were here, so that when I explain this, you won't mistake it for this. Hope I've cleared things up for you. So how can I say that One Piece has no socio-political messaging after going through the various themes it explores? Because nobody told the protagonist of this story that's what they were doing. It's always side characters doing the thematic exploration. The Straw Hats themselves couldn't care less about what the government is doing as long as it's not to them or anyone they know. Luffy especially reaches new heights of I don't give a fuck. To call him an anarchist would imply he could even conceptualize the idea of being governed. There is no evidence that Luffy believes in anything other than his own personal freedom. Hell, Luffy grew up on an island that burned its poor people alive, and it's had no visible effect on his worldview whatsoever. And let's not forget how many frenemies Luffy has in the very government that wants him dead. Sure, he's toppled a despotic regime or two, but it's always a coincidence. Either someone was a dick to someone he liked, or someone else directly asked him to. Remember, Luffy didn't fight Kaido because he was starving and enslaving the people of Wano. He fought Kaido because Trafalgar Law suggested it. Then again, of course Kaido had to also conveniently be a tyrannical dictator, because God forbid the Straw Hats be anything other than uncomplicated good guys. That's another thing. Every major villain in the series is so cartoonishly evil that taking them down is the objectively moral thing to do, regardless of one's motivations for doing so. I mean, there's an entire aristocracy whose sole purpose seems to be committing every atrocity that Jump can get away with printing. They were made to be punched. It's all because Oda doesn't want deeper implications getting in the way of his intended message of freedom, adventure, and treasure as metaphor for people and objects of sentimental value. This is valid, but also damning. It's a subtextual acknowledgement that analyzing the politics of One Piece is missing the point. Not to say you shouldn't, mind you. It's a fun exercise, as I've hopefully demonstrated over the last 4 to 6 minutes. Maybe you come to the same conclusion as me, maybe you don't. It's the effort itself that's important. Also, the story's not over yet. Plenty of time for Oda to throw in a curveball that completely changes everyone's read on One Piece. For all we know, Luffy could end up wearing an entirely different hat.